Hey everyone, today we're taking a look at Moby. This is an investment research newsletter and stock picking service kind of built by and for millennials. It brings a really sharp, witty, engaging writing style that really makes you want to read the research rather than fall asleep reading the research. One thing I really like about Moby is that it's designed to bring hedge fund level insights to regular investors. So it makes a lot of research and ideas available without making it feel overwhelming or again, just putting you to sleep. So with that, let's dive into Moby. I'll show you what this platform's all about and help you decide if it's right for you. So I'm going to show you the Moby desktop app. This is available for iOS and Android as well, and the mobile app is really seamless. The format is pretty similar between web and mobile, so it's easy to switch between the two. You get a pretty good idea of what it looks like on mobile from what I'm going to show you here. So the first thing I want to show you is the Daily Digest. This is a daily morning newsletter, similar to something like Morning Brew, if you're familiar with that newsletter. It's witty, it's sharp, it's going to keep you engaged and tell you everything you need to know about what's going on in the market. And it brings kind of an angle for the savvy investor, not necessarily the DIY investor, but people who are interested in what's going on in the market and want to take advantage of this daily information to make decisions. So it's really easy to just swipe through the main stories in each daily newsletter. They'll talk about major earnings reports, major market trends, specific companies, political events that are going to shape the market, things like that. So it's, again, a really nice resource. You don't actually have to pay for Moby in order to get the Daily Digest. It's free. Again, similar to newsletters like Morning Brew that are also free. I really like this one, especially if you're interested in the broader Moby ecosystem. That broader ecosystem is all about stock picks and research. So if we take a look at the research tab here, the first thing we're going to see are Moby's stock picks. There's typically 3 new picks per week, so it's actually a very high frequency for stock picks. And what's cool about these is that they come with a lot of information. So right away, you can see Moby's price target. This is typically a 1-year price target, as well as what the price was when this research report was put out. You get a couple quick facts about the stock itself, and then you get a research report that's fairly quick to start. So what I really like about Moby here is that it offers a quick overview and a deep dive. So the quick overview is not like ultra quick. It's a couple minute read. It's pretty detailed and gives you a pretty good idea of why you should invest in this company that Moby's recommending. Essentially, why Moby thinks this is a company that's going to beat the market. If you want to dive in deeper, I highly recommend this. This is where Moby really shines. You get a ton of research, and it's written in a way that's understandable for the average smart investor. You don't have to dive in and be the active trader or run your own cash flow models in order to understand these research reports. So to give you an example here, starts out with an executive summary. You dive into all sorts of details about the company, their background, mission, vision, sustainability. It does essentially a peer analysis talking about the competitive environment. So looking at technology, what gives this company a moat, things like that. And then I really like this bull case, bear case, base case. So this is basically looking at different risks to the company or tailwinds that could drive it forward, even above and beyond Moby's price target. I love this bull case, bear case, base case format because it lets me quickly identify where the sort of things to watch for this stock are. And particularly for the bear case, I can look at the risks and think about whether I think that those risks are likely, what my portfolio is like, and whether I'm hedged against those risks with other holdings, things like that. If you want to look at risk more in detail, Moby has a whole section in this research report on that and just kind of a balanced perspectives section, which again does a really nice job of laying out the risks in a balanced way, not making them sound catastrophic, but being clear about what they are so you can go into every investment with your eyes wide open. There's also details about the latest earnings call and the company's valuation. This is really helpful, again, if you want to dive into this company in more depth and really understand exactly what you're investing in. To me, this research is kind of reminiscent of something that you get from like Seeking Alpha or Stock Rover, also really great investment research tools. But what I like about Moby is that they do all the legwork for you and do all of this research and then present it to you in a readable format that you can actually understand. You don't have to dive into any of the data or numbers yourselves. It's kind of like a really well-written contributor article from Seeking Alpha. But instead of reading articles from 10 or 20 different contributors to get all this information, you get it all in one research report within Moby, and it's presented in a clear, consistent voice, again, with that sort of witty edge that Moby brings to all of their writing that keeps you engaged. And I really like that because you're not getting that kind of conflicting information, but you are getting that bull and bear case at the same time. The only thing I would say that I don't love about Moby's reports is that in giving you this report and all of this kind of summarized data, pros and cons, bull and bear case, all of that, you never actually look at the underlying numbers. So you're never going to look at a cash flow table or a balance sheet. There's information about a company's price to earnings ratio and how it compares to peers, but you're not going to dive into how that valuation has changed over time or see a chart of valuation versus stock price. You're not going to find that in Moby. If you're interested in that kind of really dig in to the numbers, do your own modeling, run your own kind of valuation analyses, definitely recommend checking out an alternative like Seeking Alpha or Stockrover. Those give you a bit more ability to dig into the numbers yourselves if you're interested in that. So that said, I think a lot of DIY investors and active investors who don't have tons of time will really like Moby's approach. But the most hands-on DIY investors, people who really want to dig into the underlying data, aren't going to love Moby's approach as much, or may want to consider pairing Moby with a more data-driven platform like Seeking Alpha or Stockrover. One other thing I think is worth pointing out about Moby's picks that makes them just a little bit harder to use, or at least makes you want to be a little more careful using them, is that while you get a price target, Moby doesn't provide entry prices or stop loss targets for your trade. So you have to be really careful to manage your own risk when you're trading any of the stocks that Moby recommends. This makes it pretty different from a service like the Motley Fool Stock Advisor that I'll talk about in more detail at the end of this review. Moby also, although it has stock picks given out 3 times a week, because there are no stop losses, only price targets, and there are so many picks, it's really hard to know how their portfolio has actually performed over time, whether these stock picks are actually beating the market. I dug into Moby a bit, and there's just really not a good way to confirm sort of how their portfolio has performed. So definitely keep that in mind and track your performance if you're using Moby's stock picks. Make sure that the service is actually working for you and delivering returns that at least match and ideally outmatch the broader market. So in addition to those 3 picks per week, Moby also keeps AI portfolios, and these are pretty neat. There's a few of them, flagship, dividend, offshore, ESG focused. So you can dig into these different portfolios, and they typically have anywhere from a few to 15 or 20 stocks at a time. It just depends on when you're looking at them. What's interesting about these portfolios is that they can change a lot from month to month. So it's not unusual to see this is the flagship portfolio for this month. If we go to the old portfolio, some of the names are the same, but I would say just on a quick look, it's about half of them. You can see that if we go to the old portfolio from just the previous month, only about half the names are the same, and the weights of the stocks that were in the portfolio are vastly different. So you do have to manage your portfolio pretty significantly from month to month to follow along with these AI-generated portfolios. And when Moby talks about AI generated, essentially they're using a quantitative model that uses machine learning. So it's based on past market data. It's not a fully generative AI sort of ChatGPT generated portfolio. There is a pretty detailed report on how the portfolio performed over the last several months. So it's actually really easy to track the performance of these AI influenced portfolios and see what happened, changes that have been made to the portfolio, and pretty good explanation as to why changes were made in most cases. That said, the fact that these portfolios do change so much from month to month can be good and bad. It's nice for active investors who want to keep adapting to market changes and changing conditions, something that you wouldn't do with a more long-term portfolio. On the other hand, because it's changing from month to month so much, there are tax implications to using and following these portfolios. Moby doesn't optimize for tax loss harvesting, so keep that in mind that there can be a pretty significant tax hit at the end of the year if you're trading every month to match these portfolios. Moby does offer a few other tools as part of its research package. For example, there's a heat map. I don't find these particularly helpful, to be honest, but they're similar to what you would find for free in FinViz. They let you look at the full market by market cap or equal rating. You can dive into sectors, and it just offers a way to visualize performance across the market. Um, so that's available if you're interested in that. The other thing that can be helpful here, you can see gainers, losers, and the most active stocks. So if you're looking for momentum ideas, or just interested in sort of trending tickers across sectors, this is a nice little panel to have. Again, not groundbreaking, but nice to have. And then the last thing I want to highlight here is the earnings calendar. This is really nice, again, for active investors, just to keep up with what companies have earnings coming up, especially if they're in your portfolio. And then the last thing I want to highlight in Moby is the news panel here. I think Moby does a really great job with news because their articles mirror the tone and style of that daily newsletter, where it's sharp, engaging. You want to read these articles, and it's just, you retain more information when you're reading about companies and it feels engaging rather than like someone is lecturing numbers to you. So for example, this is an article about Airbnb's earnings beat, and it's just dives into actually what happened on the earnings call, what Airbnb reported, and it basically covers what matters and leaves out all the stuff that doesn't. It's short, it's quick, it's to the point, and it's easy to read. Other news can focus on individual companies, often around earnings, but sometimes companies that are just outperforming the market or underperforming badly. These news articles will dive into why and some of the sentiment around that. Other times they'll talk about political events that are influencing the market, or CEOs that are making headlines, or entire sectors that are experiencing pretty big trends. It's a nice way, in addition to the daily newsletter and the stock picks, to keep up with what's going on in the market, come up with your own ideas, and really just stay on top of everything happening in your portfolio. Okay, so how much does Moby actually cost? Well, you get access to the daily newsletter for free, but all of the other features I showed you require a Moby premium subscription. That's going to cost $99 for your first year, or $365 per year after that. So it's not a fully cheap service, but it is in line with what other stock picking services cost. I think it can be worth it if you're interested in those 3 weekly stock picks, as well as the AI model portfolios, and if you just enjoy the way that Moby approaches news and the market. That said, if you're interested in Moby stock recommendations and model portfolios, I do think it's worth comparing this service against a dedicated stock research service like the Motley Fool Stock Advisor. Stock Advisor has been around since 2002, so a lot longer than Moby, and it's delivered really impressive performance over that same time. As of February 2026, it's up 884% compared to 193% for the S&P 500. And that's the best long-term performance of any stock research service I've tested. Just the fact that Stock Advisor tracks its performance so closely is a big confidence boost to me compared to Moby, since I don't really have a way of knowing whether Moby's picks have consistently panned out. Stock Advisor takes a pretty different approach with its recommendations compared to Moby. It's focused entirely on long-term growth investing, so all the recommendations have a time horizon of at least 5 years. You only get 2 new recommendations per month compared to 3 per week with Moby. But I actually think that this can be helpful for a lot of investors since it requires a lot less active portfolio management, and you can have a lot more confidence in each of the recommendations. Stock Advisor issues research reports with each recommendation, just like Moby does. Although Stock Advisor's reports are more like the summary section of Moby's reports, and they don't include all the detailed research that Moby's reports cover below that main summary. So that diving in that Moby does. If you want to invest more frequently than twice a month, Stock Advisor comes with a monthly rankings list that highlights the 10 best stocks in the portfolio to consider doubling down on right now. I also really like that Stock Advisor gives you instructions about when to sell stocks from the portfolio, so you're not left guessing like you are with Moby. Both Moby and Stock Advisor cost $199 per year, and you can get your first year of Stock Advisor for $99 with the link I'll include with this video. Overall, I think Moby is a solid choice if you're interested in frequent recommendations and you're comfortable with more self-directed portfolio management. But I recommend Stock Advisor if you're primarily interested in building a successful long-term portfolio with the least amount of work. To wrap up, Moby offers a 14-day free trial and a 30-day money-back guarantee. So definitely give the app a try for yourself and see how you like it to decide if it's the right recommendation service for you.